It is. And these are the leaders of the countries that are most afraid of what Russia might do next if it's allowed to get away with its war in Ukraine. So they're countries that border, for the most part, border Ukraine. They're countries that know what Russian aggression has been like in the past. They were, many of these leaders, they are familiar with what Soviet rule was like. So it is quite a show of support. These are the leaders that are pushing in the most significant way in the European Council to get the EU to impose more significant sanctions on Russia. So it is quite a show of support, particularly given Kiev is this morning, as we speak, being bombed.
Yeah. We also saw quite an astounding act of dissent on Russian television, a very risky move from the journalist. Take us through what happened.
It was quite incredible. So on live, free-to-air television on the state-run Channel 1, which in Russia is essentially the top news channel, a journalist was reading a news bulletin and all of a sudden a woman rushed up from behind her holding a placard which said, "Don't believe what they're telling you. They're not telling you the truth. Stop the war." It's not even legal to call what's happening in Ukraine a war in Russia. So this was a significant act of protest. The woman, her name is Marina Ovsyanikova, she was on the screen for several seconds. She was able to get that message across before the TV station cut to footage elsewhere and she disappeared off the screen. That happened yesterday around about now, I think something like 14 hours ago. And she hasn't been seen since. What people are saying is that she's been arrested and has been detained and is facing up to 15 years in jail.
Yeah, which is the term that was introduced just since the start of this invasion. You have, Zoya, been speaking to members of the Ukrainian resistance, which, wasn't something that even existed a couple of weeks ago. What are the stories that you are hearing?
It's really quite incredible. I myself was born in Ukraine. I know a lot of people who remain there now. So I've been getting in touch with people who are friends of friends on the ground. And it's incredible. It's people who were teachers, people who are economists, engineers, not people you would think of who would take up any sort of arms or take up the resistance, but they are so determined that they are not going to allow Putin to take over their country. So I've been speaking with several people on the ground. One woman who's 36 years old, she's a mother of two, she's an economist, and she has started essentially an NGO, which is buying up supplies in Romania and then essentially driving cars, volunteers are driving cars into Romania just across the border from Ukraine, picking up these goods, which are also being delivered by people who are just benevolently giving money, time, etc. They're picking those goods up from Romania and driving them across the border into Ukraine in order to supply some of these really hard-hit cities. Particularly, they've got shortages of medication because pharmacies in Kiev, in the capital and elsewhere, are not able to open, are not able to resupply. People don't have nappies for their children, so they're taking nappies into Ukraine. And these are just regular, ordinary people. And I spoke with this one woman who's quite extraordinary. Her name is Yulia, and she said to me, look, before this war, 2 weeks ago, my main concern, my top worry was whether a coach bag I bought online was going to arrive in time. And now I'm shuttling tons of goods across the border from Romania into Ukraine to keep our people going. So it's incredible.
The way people have marshalled, we just had a story about how people in Poland are opening their homes to refugees from Ukraine. It's marshalled people in such an extraordinary way. But what we do know is that so many are still desperately trying to get out, trying to desperately find safe passage. Is there any hope that these humanitarian corridors today will be properly established and that Russia will respect them?
Russia does not respect humanitarian corridors. And what we've seen over the past few weeks is that they will say that they have agreed to a humanitarian corridor, and then there are always strings attached. Those strings might be, firstly, you're only allowed to leave to go to Russia. You can't leave to go to the west of Ukraine or to the rest of Europe. Or they might just start indiscriminately bombing people. So yesterday, for instance, they let a few buses leave Mariupol, and then they started firing on the last 4 buses, and several people were injured and someone was killed. So this is a real pattern of events. I think it's part of a general push to make people afraid. And so they're really not respecting humanitarian corridors. Some people are getting out. There are some people every day who are managing to get out. But it is at the same time completely and intensely dangerous to do that, to try to attempt to leave some of these besieged cities.
Zoya, you know, you talk about having been born in Ukraine. Give us a sense of how this feels for you reporting on this story.
It feels so horrific, to be honest, because it's so personal for me. When I'm talking about bombs falling on cities, these are cities I've been to. They're cities where I have friends. When I talk about people being besieged and not having food, not having water, children dying, these are people who are friends of my friends. These are people I know personally. So it has been horrific. It's been very difficult for me to watch, but it's nothing compared to the people who have been left behind there. So I just am so impressed by the bravery of ordinary people who are doing everything they can on the ground to ensure that their fellow Ukrainians are able to get through this.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible fight. Zoya, we do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.